Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks so much for joining and welcome to this webinar. I'm Vanni Sanvincenti, lead architect with the Industry Architecture and Global Standards team here at IATA. We haven't done one of these webinars like diving into standards in a couple of years, so we're very excited to be here and looking forward also to answering your questions towards the end of the session. And reading through your comments. I believe my colleague has pointed that out in chat. Please feel free to use the chat and the ask a question feature in the webinar tool during the presentation so that we can already start to triage questions for the Q&A session at the end. And so joining us today are our two airline guests and colleagues, Vicente and Ricardo, and my colleague Mladenka from IATA. So if I could just ask you to introduce yourselves real quick. Thanks.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Vicente Zepeda Cabral. I'm Solution Manager, Research and Development at Hahn. I'm also chair of the Offers and Orders Technology Standards Support Working Group, also known as Orozco. Also member of Shop Order Pay Standards Board and of the Architecture and Technology Strategy Board, and member of other business working groups as well.
Hello, everybody. So thank you very much for inviting me. So my name is Ricardo Orozco. I'm the head of NDC Solutions and Standards in Lufthansa Group, so working for Swiss. On the IATA or on the standard side, I'm also the vice chair of Orozco. I won't do Vicente, I won't say the whole name, not to worry you. And I also join as a member on the Shop Order Pay Standard Board, pushing for the industry.
Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining us in such a large number. My name is Mladenka Vukmirovic. I'm Senior Manager Standards Development in IATA, and I'm a Secretary of Offers and Orders Working Group, Order Payment Working Group, Order Accounting Working Group, and last but not the least, Offer and Order Technology Standard Support Working Group, working actively with Vicente and Ricardo on enhancing the standards for the industry.
Thanks and welcome everyone again. So we understand we have a varied audience today with both business and technical backgrounds, those involved in implementing the standards and those looking to, well, begin their journey. So we'll be discussing functionality in the standards in terms of their business capabilities that these bring out, as well as some of the more technical aspects of those currently implementing. So the main audience for this content is those currently running their NDC implementations on one of the versions dating back from 2017 or 2018. So we'll get started with that. So just to set the scene a little bit, many of you may have heard of convergence before. This is when there's a consensus over which particular version of the standards should be, let's say, more widely adopted. And that, well, given that IATA releases up to 4 standards packages a year, this general consensus would allow airlines to, and IT providers, enough time to implement specific release to kind of maximize the number of partners and integrations. Through this assurance that everyone's speaking the same language. And this made sense back in 2017 and up until recently, but things have changed since then, meaning we've attained a higher degree of stability in the standards. And as a consequence, we're putting more emphasis on the capabilities rather than any technical changes, let's say. So we should be moving over into an era of adoption where we should be more comfortable with adopting newer releases, but also more releases concurrently, and that's really important. So actually supporting multiple versions of this at the same time. Again, something that should become easier with the releases going forward, thanks to their increase in stability. So in this webinar, we'll be talking about or key improvements that have been made cumulatively since 2017 up until the 24.1 release, which is considered like a key milestone in terms of its capabilities. We'll be addressing some of the confusion over the last 2.5 years of updates to the 21.3 release. So demystifying that a little bit. We'll be talking about the stability of the standards in the context of its overall release life cycle. And we'll also be taking a sneak peek at some of the more interesting upcoming features in future releases. So we'll start by taking a quick look at some numbers. Can't have a webinar without at least one pie chart. So here it is. And what we have here is a distribution of schema versions across the total number of capabilities validated through our ARM index platform. So the ARM index is the Airline Retailing Maturity Index platform, which many refer to as our certification platform here at IATA. And of all these capabilities across all implementers in the registry, we see that a total of 61% are capabilities certified on either 17.2 or 18.1, making these two releases the most widely currently implemented today, to date. So an 18.2, as it wasn't too different from 18.1, we could club that together as well, and that would mean that 74%, basically 3/4 of implementers, are on one of those three versions, which are 6 to 7 years old, respectively. But it's also very encouraging to see that 21.3 comes in third place, and my colleagues will be talking more about the significance of 21.3 later. So statistically speaking, those of you on this webinar who are using the standards are supporting one of these releases, like the majority of you, which is why we decided to organize this webinar to give you a brief overview of what you'll be able to benefit from coming all the way from 17.2, again, which is a 7-year-old release. Moving on. So if we take a look at the total number of companies on the ARM index registry who are currently certified on either 17.2 or 18.1, so the two most popular releases, which is 120 companies, we see that 34 of those 120 have already started implementing a release of 21.3 and above, or above, rather. And by companies, we mean airlines, sellers, and the IT providers for both airlines and sellers. So of those 120, 50 of them are airlines. And of those 50 airlines, 14 of them have already certified capabilities in 21.3 or later. And there are also 9 other airlines who are moving from versions after 18.1, so I've included them there. So that means we have a total today of 23 airlines implementing the releases 21.3 or over. But this is just to show you that one, adoption of 21.3 or later is actually well underway, and that two, that the players who that these are actually the players who have the most to gain from upgrading to a recent release, because of all the cumulative improvements that have been made over the years. So this next slide explains one of the several reasons as to why implementers have been so attached to a 7-year-old release for so long, right? So first of all, for those of you who might not be familiar, this is a somewhat technical term. Augmentations are areas of the messages intended to allow airlines to enter non-standard information for bilateral use. So it's like a small pocket within the message structure to allow for some customization. And because of their flexible nature, these augmentation points are not something the industry should standardize. Although we have in the past made one exception to this when we solved for a functionality gap in 17.2 release to provide support for 3D Secure version 2, which was a regulatory requirement at the time from PSD2, the EU directive for customer authentication payments. And in this one case, we agreed on how to bring this capability to 17.2 implementers over from the 19.2 release, which was the first release to support this feature natively or out of the box. And so that's what we call retrofitting. And so what we're observing through the messages submitted to us through the ARM Index platform, our certification platform, is that a large portion of implementers are using augmentation points for a number of different reasons. In some cases, because there may be gaps in the standards, but mostly to bring in functionality that exists in subsequent versions of the standards without having to go through all the hassle and the costs of doing a full upgrade to the APIs. So back then, yes, certainly convenient, but year after year, these customizations have been compounded into these older versions of the standards by way of augmentation. So there's a lot of patching and customization, which at a certain point could even reclassify your API as proprietary rather than adherent to a standard because of the extent of customization. And this also over time limits the ease in which you can, onboard other or new partners in terms of integration. And it becomes increasingly more complex and costly to maintain, again, in the long run. So it's discouraged, but it's there because sometimes it is really needed. So I think I've talked enough, and it's probably time to move on to the next portion of the webinar. So I'd like to summon my colleague Vicente from Hahn, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the concept of stability in the standards. So Vicente, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Vanni. So in terms of history, can you move to the next slide, please? In terms of history, so I will give an overview of the big changes and big disruptive changes that occurred since 17.2. Basically, in 17.2, we were handcrafted the XML schemas. I remember so many meetings where Vanni had XML spy open, and we said, hey, put this element there, move this element to another place. So that's how we used to do standards. And we had something called common types, which allowed us to reuse some of the elements, some of the structures across different messages. For developers, this was very good because a lot of code could be reused. In general, when you have a common type, you use the same way that structure in different messages. Then there was a big change in terms of methodology that happened at the industry level. So for 18.1, we introduced this AIDM methodology, Airline Industry Data Model, which allowed us to basically work on a data model instead of working directly on the schemas. And from that data model, there would be some scripts and some proprietary code in there that would generate automatically these XML schemas. The first iteration of this approach, we removed these common types, meaning that for each message, for potentially a request and response, if you had a passenger, you wouldn't need all the details to be passed in a shopping request for passenger, but you would need them in a response in order view. So we removed the common types and we said, okay, let's limit the structures to the elements that are actually required in each message, meaning that developers didn't have any more this kind of structure that was common to all messages. And then we realized that this was a big issue for development, and it added a lot of costs. So in 21.1, we released, so we continued working with schemas generated from the data model, but we reintroduced common types. If you go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, these were two major technical transformations that occurred since 17.2. So migrating to a newer version, if you were in an old one, was actually technically very difficult because the messages didn't look like they were completely different. And because most airlines had implemented 17.2, only those airlines that were starting their journey or that were moving from an old 15.1 or 2 version moved to these 18.1 or higher that were generated from the data model. So yes, considering these huge changes and considering the fact that the schemas were completely different, the industry agreed in the past to restrict non-backward compatible releases, meaning that whenever something was released, we had to ensure backwards compatibility, meaning you could move to another version, but without breaking completely the change, without having necessarily to regenerate all your classes. So this is more from a development perspective. And that's why we started talking about a convergence version, which was 21.3. However, bear in mind that 21.3 standards are not made in a couple of months. It took 2 years or more. And back at the time, we were not able to meet because of COVID. So we were not able to identify many of the issues in 21.3. So we had agreed to release only in a backward compatible way, but then we found out there were some issues in there that needed improvement. So if we move to the next slide, yes, we realized after, as Vanni said, after more than a couple of years, we have further evolution that is required. This has been identified not only from distribution side, but also from the accounting side, a group that resumed its activity after the pandemic. And we realized that if we wanted to support modern online retailing with offers and orders the proper way, we needed to do changes that were justified, that were breaking backwards compatibility. So considering these and considering the improvements that need to come to properly support full offers and orders, Shop Order Pay Standards Board has agreed the following, which is not more than one major release per year. And when we talk about major, is a set of functionalities that are being included in a delivery, in a release. And some of these could actually break the backwards compatibility. But we want to keep it controlled, meaning we need some predictability. So the plan is to, as I said, not more than one major release per year, unless, of course, it's justified by regulation, like what we had with the 3DS2, with the PSD regulation in Europe. And, of course, we have other windows of releases. We have 4 releases per year, actually. And we can use the other windows, the other releases, to deliver minor changes that do not break backwards compatibility. Of course, this doesn't mean that we need to use all of these windows. It's only when it makes sense, when there's a business requirement that has been clarified, that has been properly developed, integrated in the standards, validated, that's when we will do the releases. But yes, the idea is to have a better stability and some predictability in terms of the evolution of the schemas. So yes, the board agreed to break this backward compatibility, but only as well when justified by business requirements. So we shouldn't have the disruption that occurred from 17.2 to 18.1 and then to 21.1, meaning that a huge technical change occurred. Whenever we break backwards compatibility, it will be justified by a business requirement. And the idea is to properly document and make sure that everyone understands the change that is being introduced. So considering this whole high-level view of the history, I will ask my colleague Ricardo from Lufthansa Group to introduce some of the key capabilities that were implemented since that 17.2.
Thank you, Vicente. So now that we have been guided through the technical evolution of the schemas, let's look at a little bit on the functional business side. So if we remember what Vanni introduced, most of the airlines have implemented NDC version 17.2. This is the usable version of the schema, let's say the initial mature version that was widely adopted, but that has also been highly augmented in order to bring and benefit from some functionalities that are listed here, but also from other bilateral usage that is needed. What has happened since 17.2? So we have with 19.2, we introduced the service taxonomy, where here we have a code set with a certain hierarchy that is allowing retailers and sellers to normalize how to define services. So it's making it easier for in the retailing to understand what kind of service is being pushed. We have the introduction of offer restrictions, where we are in a machine readable way, we are able to express cancel and change restrictions, where we can indicate a type, with their effectiveness and expiration in terms of time date, certain fees if they apply, and even more information in terms of those restrictions. We revisited and revamped all the payment functions with the possibility to not only define multiple payment functions, but also, for example, introduce the support of the redirection mechanisms, credit card encryption, and as already mentioned, the proper native support of the 3DS Secure V2. In terms of time limits, this is a concept that has existed since the beginning. However, we have, with what we did also in 19.2 is a linear definition of them. So there was a cleanup of some of the time limits that were either already included in some of them, or that did not really make sense anymore in the new world. And of course, here we were also looking at the allocation of those time limits to really express the definition at the level that is needed. Now moving to 21.1, here one of the biggest changes that we introduced is a new message, so the order quote, where the objective was to streamline servicing or change transactions, even including the repricing transaction. So for example, order quote is really needed to support the ancillary servicing in a clean way, and it's used a little bit mapping what we have as an offer price transaction. And now for 21.3, we have the distribution chain, where we revisited the way to identify the active parties that have a role in the distribution value chain, and we can properly recognize who are we talking to and all the intermediaries in between. Which is one of the important steps in the identity management. And of course, we also have multiple enhancements when it comes to order change notifications and the order history, where not only we have expanded the scenarios for which notifications are sent, but also included the proper mapping to the different status codes that can then also be reflected in terms of the order history. So these are some of the main functional changes that have been introduced. There are a little bit more, but these are the ones we wanted to present to you. But we don't stop there. So this is up to 21.3. So now I would like to call back my colleague Vicente to guide us through what has happened after 21.3.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. So let's deep dive into 21.3. So the original 21.3, and I call it original because there were 7 of them. The original 21.3 was released in October 21, as far as already mentioned, high level. So there, we introduced distribution chains, so a better way to identify the parties in the transaction. We did improvements to the order quote. We deprecated some of the unneeded messages like order cancel, inventory release, inventory request. And then after that first release, we realized, we left some technical elements in there called key refs that prevented us from doing validation, like the usage of IDs and references of those IDs in other parts of the messages. That was broken. So we had to release a first technical patch to remove those. Then we realized that passenger type codes, we didn't support numbers. So we had to change that field so it could support numbers as well. So it could be alphanumeric. We corrected some of the statuses. The code set reference to some statuses at order item and service level, some typo corrections, and some annotation updates. So as you can see, yeah, those were actually patches because they were considered as bug fixes and small enough. 21.3.3, there were some changes in the settlement with order message, so that didn't impact distribution. Then in 21.3.4, we fixed the owner code in order item that was mandatory in some requests. We reintroduced the 6-digit BIN payment preferences to allow for accurate computation of payment surcharges. Then in 21.3.5, we enhanced counting messages, and we realized that we were focusing on patching and doing some minor upgrades to this 21.3 version because we called it the convergence version. However, that's the point last year, the year before, where we realized that we need additional evolution to enable modern online retailing. And most of this was driven, of course, by new business requirements that are coming on the offer order group or the order payment group, but also from the order accounting group. Yes, maybe it didn't have such a huge impact on distribution, but if you want modern online retailing with full offers and orders to work properly, we need to make sure that the end-to-end works, and that includes accounting. So accounting raised a number of concerns they had with the 21.3.5 at the time. They said that order integrity was not guaranteed, that it was very difficult, that they didn't have all the information they needed, that some information was being lost, especially in complex servicing scenarios. So that's where we actually said, okay, that we cannot just keep maintaining and patching, doing small changes to a version. There are actually business requirements to make this version evolve. So considering all the big changes that were introduced back in March 2024, yes, we did release a patch 21.3.6, but in reality, it was not a real patch because a lot of improvements were released there. So bear in mind that each of these patches actually corresponds to a release by IATA with a proper number, and we were just mapping and keeping the same main version and bumping a third digit just to make it seem like it was the same version, but it wasn't. So that's how we introduced 24.1, and I will now call Mladenka to present to us what were the improvements that were released in 24.1, much needed improvements, and how this eases our life.
Thank you, Vicente, for introducing the topic of new functionalities so well, and moreover for working hardly on actually delivering these functionalities. So what did we do in 24.1? While delivering the adequate implementation guidance, we have learned about some of the limitations of the previous releases. And 24.1, for starters, is bringing more enhanced data exchange relating to servicing. With the introduction of the change and cancellation restrictions back in 19.2, this version introduces more transparency related to charge penalties and forfeited amounts, which in turn is helping sellers and customers understand financial implications of the transaction. Clear and accurate servicing information can improve customer trust and satisfaction by providing them with reliable and understandable data, and this is what we wanted to address with the improvements that we did. The second part, which you may be aware of, is order integrity. For the ones not as familiar, order integrity ensures that the values of order items match the payment received. This process is crucial for maintaining accurate and reliable transaction records. And by verifying that each order's financial details are consistent, actually businesses can prevent discrepancies, reduce errors, and enhance overall trust in their financial operations. For the ones among you who want to get more information about this important topic, I will politely ask you to refer to our webinar from last week that was done by Miriam Bourget from Swiss and Roxana Pavane from Emirates, together with my colleague Andrei Grinchenko. What we also discussed at length and where a lot of our attention went is to handling of reusable amounts. This is a very important topic on both sides, sellers and airlines. And we took the opportunity to explore the servicing and handling these amounts in more details. And as a result, 24.1 release is aiming to handle these remaining amounts outside of the order structure. So what does this actually mean? In prior releases, we handled the remaining amounts within the order structure by use of the value store, which is effectively a service within an order items. And that brought a lot of restriction on how these amounts could be used by the airlines for the customers. And the transactions that needed to come out of these changes were fairly complex. So the airlines made the decision that actually it's for the best to have a separate system that will handle these remaining amounts, enabling the flexibility to the customers and themselves to use the amount in whichever way they want, be that it is for flight or additional ancillary services, or even outside of the what airlines are usually providing, meaning the products that are provided by the third-party providers, which was felt as a huge improvement to the current standard. The next one on the list is distribution chain and verifiable credentials. It proved that it's very important to know the participants in data exchange to be able to more efficiently prevent fraud attempts. And by inclusion of verifiable credentials, this is exactly what the standard is aiming to improve. New features in the standard include support for accounting processes, and this support is done without tickets and EMDs being the carriers of the data that are needed to do accounting processes. This approach provides to the airlines better financial accuracy, streamlined operations, increased transparency, and better compliance. To chime into this particular improvement, next topic is stating that we align the order structure between distribution and accounting, and this was exactly to provide the seamless separation between the two parts. Apart from these general improvements, we also had a regulatory request from Reserve Bank of India. They included a new secure tokenization process in their payment processing, and now the standards from release 24.3 also supports for this particular process. Apart from that, in between all of the patches that Vicente was explaining just earlier, we have introduced a bug related to the OCN and order history messages, and this was finally cleared in release 24.1. By leveraging these new standards and these new functionalities, TMCs and other stakeholders, so airlines and everybody else in the chain, can offer more personalized and dynamic travel options to their clients, enhancing overall experience. My part is also to share more how we are organizing when it comes to the standard developments. As lately we have introduced new collaboration platform, which enables us to follow more closely on the requirements that we are getting from all stakeholders. So according to the roadmap agreed with the airlines, we are going to work on following features, and the first list that you are seeing now on your screen is actually the ones that we are intending to deliver throughout this year. So it includes credit card payments with installments. This came from Latin American market. And support in Brazil and other Latin American countries. The second functionality that you may expect is split payments. It is related to use of several payment methods to cover for the value of one or more order items. The next one on the list is enhanced flight-specific search. Currently, we do have an option, of course, to do the flight-specific search for the offers that are requested by the customers. This enhancement will include better ability to search by flight number and connecting flights and asking for a specific flight which is looked up by the customer. In addition, we've been working hard on handling of consumption taxes and taxes in general. To overcome the limitation of the current systems and to provide better regulation compliance for the airlines. Airlines were also very interested to have the standard between offer management system and order management system with the aim to avoid the lock out of the providers providing both of these systems to them. And we are not done with the servicing, even with a lot of work that has been done previously. We still have to deliver more enhancements when it comes to the handling of changes of unpaid orders and handling of unused services. Later on the horizon, we are also discussing credit management system that I mentioned earlier, which is related to handling of the unused amounts. Product catalog standard, interline, intermodal, and delivery with orders. And now I will ask Ricardo to share with us some details on how Lufthansa Group intends to leverage on these new functionalities.
Absolutely, Mladenka. So thank you very much for the introduction. So maybe to look at simplifying the upgrade from 21.3 and to 24.1. So I don't know, Vicente, maybe you can start with the practical side and.
Absolutely. So I will not go into too many details here, of course, but yeah, just to mention that upgrading from 21.3, any of those patches that we saw, to a 24.1 or a more recent version, which would be even better, it's actually very easy. Let's say in terms technically, the 24.1, except for a couple of minor exceptions, it's fully backward compatible. So you actually, if you're in a 21.3 version, you're already in a 24.1 or greater version. So yeah, if you're already there, if you already made the huge investment to go from these old 17 to 18.x versions to 21.3, the effort to migrate and to move to 24.1 is minimal. We kept, from the improvements, one of the main functional differences is the way we handle penalties and forfeit amounts, as Mladenka explained. This is for complex servicing, but the old mechanisms are still in place, the ones from 21.3, so that's why the move is not as difficult as you may think. Of course, the goal is not to keep you doing the old way, because when you migrate to the new way of doing servicing and disclosing these penalties, forfeited amounts, basically you're removing constraints and problems in the downstream processes, and it will enable that full offer and order transformation. Of course, if you're just starting now, do not limit yourself to 24.1. You can actually target 24.4 or maybe 25.1 if it has already been released. There were some small improvements, but the effort to integrate a 24.1 or a more recent version is pretty much the same. So yeah, I also wanted to stress something important is in the old releases, we didn't have an implementation guide. Now we have worked since 2021, we have been working on an enhanced implementation guide with a set of XML samples for different use cases, improved documentation in terms of concepts and capabilities, which are the ones being certified in the ARM index. So that should ease implementation and remove the differences between implementers, make sure that everyone has the same understanding of how to use the standards. It's still work in progress, it's not exhaustive yet. And whenever we release new features, new change requests, we will include documentation for those change requests and how to use those new features being introduced. Of course, we need also to catch up and enrich with more use cases, but this implementation guidance also will help you a lot in, to migrate and to integrate this new 24.1 version. So maybe let's, Ricardo, you can explain to us the approach from Lufthansa Group on how that migration has been approached.
Absolutely, Vicente. Thank you. So if you have heard, we have been quite busy in terms of the industry and in bringing new functionalities and bringing more value to the different schemas. So what we're doing in Lufthansa Group is that we're really looking in the way to minimize the impact while maximizing the value in order to help with the transition. To do this, and in close collaboration with our IT provider, we are enabling what we call the hybrid servicing, where we're going to be to maintain the 17.2 initial booking flow, so for the shop order, the ancillaries, and the seats, and we are introducing the servicing capabilities that I think that is one of the key points where new capabilities, new features have been brought to the standard in the newer versions of the schema, so that this servicing can be then executed using the 24.1 version of the schema on the 17.2 orders. So the idea is, so this is also transitional. So our target picture is really to move to the full support of the version, but we really want to bring value as quick as possible. And this is one approach that we are taking in Lufthansa Group in order to really benefit from all the new key features that are part of the standard. So thank you very much. So I think we go back to Vanni.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you to all our presenters. Yeah, actually, if I can ask you all to join us back on the cameras, because we'll be wrapping up. We're on time. We have 15 minutes remaining, which we would like to use for Q&A, but we'll just quickly, as part of the wrap up, maybe just share some conclusions and takeaways with our audience. So maybe I'll start with Vicente.
Yes, thank you, Vanni. So from my side, being in all these groups, in all the boards, being the chair of the technical group, I can clearly say that the work is not over yet. We still have a lot to do. We're working right now on simulating other complex servicing scenarios, like changing orders without instant payment and what happens to inventory if you don't pay on time, or if there is a schedule change in the meantime. So we're validating these kind of complex scenarios. So far, it's very good news and I'm very happy to say that we have validated these changes using the new way of doing servicing, and it seems to work with minor changes. So it's very encouraging for the future. It means that we have a good basis. That's why we believe 24.1 is the minimum basis to enable to unlock all these complex scenarios. And I guess this is great news for everyone, but mostly for corporate travelers, because they are the ones that have most of the requirements for complex servicing. They are the ones that need to be serviced in an automated way. Everything needs to work fine for them. So that's, very encouraging. And as I said it earlier, we're in a much better position now than 7-8 years ago when we're doing these old standards. We have better documentation. We have XML samples, something we didn't have in the past. And we also have an improved quality assurance process, meaning that whenever there's a new release, with samples that exist and with samples that we generate for new features, we're actually able to validate that the schemas are working, the standards are working. So I think we're in a good position to continue the evolution. So don't expect 24.1 to be the last version. No, there are actually already 3-4 versions since then, and that evolution will continue. as you could see from Mladenka's roadmap, there's still a lot of things to solve. And yes, some of those things may require some redesign, but when justified, we will go for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicente. Ricardo?
Thank you. So I think just to echo back what Vicente said, for me, it has been very interesting to see the evolution in the industry discussions when a couple of years ago, we often were asking ourselves the question of why are we doing this? Why are we transitioning? Why do we need offers and orders? And I think that now it's more the question of how. There are still a lot of questions on the how, and as Vicente was saying, we are looking into the schemas and we're really looking into the standard to make it evolve on the right direction. But it's great for me to see that we are joined as an industry. We're working towards that. Not only airlines pushing, but also now we see the whole industry or the whole community pushing for the offer and order transformation. And maybe here also it's very good to hear and very good to get the feedback from all of you in terms of the things that need to be fixed. But it will also be great if you can also help us contribute with how to solve those, how to bridge those gaps. And we as an industry, actually, it's us building the standard and making it evolve. So it would be great for all of you to join us in developing and making the standard evolve in a direction that can be used by all of us.
Thanks, Ricardo. Move on to Mladenka.
So thank you very much to all of you for listening to us and getting the information on what we have been doing in past period. I will just echo what Ricardo was saying and also what Vicente was saying. We have a lot to improve ahead of us, and it would be great if you can join us in the efforts and become a part of our standard setting environment as well. For two reasons: you can share your experience from the implementations and also help us move faster to reach the standards that are more fitted for your use and that are bringing more value to all stakeholders in the process. Back to you, Vanni.
Thanks. I think I'll quickly add that from my perspective, I think what's really important is for airlines and their IT providers to start kind of adapting and normalizing the pace of changes. Despite the level of stability that we now have reached, we need to make changes to development methodologies to be able to more quickly adopt features as and when they're released, and preferably without augmentations, as I described before, but adoption of newer standards versions. And I say this preemptively as we know there's some very big components that have yet to come, right? Mladenka mentioned them briefly earlier, such as interlining, even intermodal, expanding ancillary shopping, the whole product management dimension, potentially more improvements to disruptions management and automation. So I'm trying to avoid the using the cliche word agile, but basically it's to find a way to reduce the time to adopt these capabilities once they're released. And one last point also is that today airlines are supporting a subset of the capabilities in 17.2. The first step is likely to be simply moving over to moving these capabilities over rather to the new version of the API, ideally 24.1, because it's got servicing everything is working much better. And as soon as that's done, the subset of capabilities becomes much smaller in proportion to the extended feature set of 24.1. So then the real work of implementing complex servicing, for example, will begin. So slowly filling all those functionality gaps that we had because of the limitations in 17.2. So that concludes the conclusion, and we're going to maybe look at some of the questions from the audience, and we'll see who is brave enough to address them. The first one here is: there will not be one industry standard as different versions remain in use. Well, the standards do need to keep evolving. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I guess to the point I just made, it's important to to just find the right agility to keep up with the changes. Interlining is going to be a huge part that's inevitable. Everyone needs to be able to support and integrate it. So when that time arrives, then yes, there will be a new version of the standards. There will be a lot of additional work, but this is, I would say, inevitable. What is the total number of capabilities in the ARM index? Yeah, so I was able to quickly text our platform manager. There are 2,900 capabilities in total that have been validated on the ARM index. And for those, a total of almost 9,000 XML messages were required to validate all those. So a lot of work over the years. And move on to the next question. Not one single industry standard, but a minimum version that covers a good set of capabilities and improvements in other versions. We know that standards are not in their final state, so it is necessary to continue their evolution. So that's just a comment. Yes. As travel agents mark up on fares, it is important and wanted to know if support for markup on fares is something that the roadmap for development. Maybe I can ask Mladenka to comment.
Yes, sure, I can take that one. So one of the groups is discussing this topic right now. You need to just mind one thing as we move ahead to the new set of standards. We often reassess the meaning of the terms that we are using and how they are going to be implemented in the future world. So as markups will continue to exist and the agencies will have opportunity to do markups like they do to date, we may see the change on how the mechanics will work on it. So on this one, I can only tell you stay tuned and you will get the information back in coming months.
Thank you. Next question. Why was the ability to apply an unused ticket moved from offer price in 17.2 to order create in 21.3? Could it be considered to be reinstated back to the supported on the offer price? Maybe Vicente or Ricardo?
Yeah, just to say, and actually this has been a point of discussion. We're actually focusing in all the standards group on the long term, meaning on a state where there are no tickets anymore, but we're talking about full offers and orders with a proper accounting from offers based on services, tracking delivery status of those at the service level. So we actually haven't focused on this. But we do have mechanisms to actually in the offers and order world to keep an order item kind of open, meaning you cancel your inventory but keep the value of that order item in there with the conditions that are still applicable until you're ready to reuse it. We're also introducing new mechanisms, as Mladenka mentioned, this credit management system. So a way to basically apply the rules when you're canceling and have like a value that can be reused with less restrictions or with different conditions. So yeah, that we're more working in improving how to manage that unused value instead of trying to fit tickets and unused tickets in the standards. So Ricardo, if you want to comment.
No, I think that you cover it all. I think that in the end, today, the transition is more of a bilateral question, and where we have how we use the current schemas to be able to distribute in the existing world. And there are different implementations that may do different things. The schemas bring capabilities to support that, but indeed, our focus from a standardization perspective is looking at the target picture.
Thank you. Another question here. Why is order cancel an unneeded message in 21.3?
I can answer that. So yeah, order cancel in the past basically was just taking an order ID in there and answering with a okay, it happened. But actually, this is not enough. So we said, okay, to cancel an order, let's go through an offer, through a reach up process to cancel. And basically, you cancel an item or the whole order by accepting a cancellation offer. But you also need to know in the response, what was the result? Was it actually canceled? Did it happen? Are all my service item statuses as I expect them to be? What is the result in terms of payment? So that's why we deprecated order cancel, which was a very simple message, and we introduced the cancellation capability in the order change request with order view response.
Thanks. Yeah. What is delivery on orders? Who'd like to take that one?
Okay, it's
Mladenka.
fair because I mentioned delivery on orders only briefly. So today, as you are aware, we are using coupon statuses on the ticket to communicate that customer has flown on the flight. In future, we intend to deliver a more enhanced set of standards that will enable exchange of the information related to delivery of the specific service, flights and any other ancillaries included. This is what we mean by delivery on orders, as the order itself will contain the mechanics to communicate this information back to the seller and eventually customer.
Thanks, Mladenka. I'm being reminded that we have reached the end of our allotted time. I know the audience posted plenty of questions. We didn't get a chance to cover all of them today. So what we can do is address them in writing and then send a kind of a follow-up email to all participants, including the presentation as well. So those who register will be able to rewatch this webinar as well, in case you missed any parts of it. So again, thank you all for joining. A big thanks to Vicente, Ricardo, and Mladenka for their contribution today. And I hope you found it interesting. There's going to be a follow-up webinar actually to this one in the coming weeks. Dates are still to be determined, so stay tuned, and I hope to see you all on the next one. Have a great day. Thanks and goodbye.